Space. Endless. Silent. Indifferent. The Luthari Dominion had ruled these stars for over 1,000 cycles, their empire stretching across the void like an unstoppable tide. Their fleets were vast, their technologies unmatched, their conquests absolute. They had seen empires rise and fall, species ascend to greatness and then wither into extinction. And yet, they had never known fear. Until now. Deep within the Dominion's core systems, in a heavily fortified sector known as Xylithra Prime, an anomaly had appeared. At first, the sentient AI overseeing the Dominion's vast network of deep space sensors dismissed it as a glitch. A phantom reading. A malfunction caused by the shifting gravitational currents of a nearby pulsar. But then, the anomaly moved. It wasn't drifting like debris. It wasn't some rogue asteroid caught in a celestial dance. It was deliberate. Purposeful. A vessel. The Luthari Science Directorate was the first to analyze the data. What they found sent ripples of unease through the highest ranks of the Empire. The object was accelerating at speeds that defied known physics, moving in a straight, unwavering trajectory toward the Dominion's core worlds. Every known species had a signature. Plasma wakes, ion distortions, electromagnetic interference. But this was silent. No comms, no transponders, no identifiable energy readings. Then the worst realization came. It was human. The Luthari had studied humanity from afar. A reckless, chaotic species, obsessed with war and conflict. They were primitive by galactic standards, barely clawing their way into interstellar travel. Their first steps beyond their homeworld had been riddled with turmoil. Wars, internal strife, political instability. The Luthari had deemed them insignificant. A curiosity, nothing more. Yet here it was, a human warship, and it was heading straight for them. The Veil Quran, Luthari's fleet. Command on board the Veil Quran, the Dominion's most powerful warship. Tension crackled like an ion storm. The bridge, a sprawling command center of shimmering, crystalline interfaces and holographic displays, was alive with the urgent chatter of officers. Strategic projections flickered across the void glass screens, showing the impossible object cutting through space like a knife through flesh. High strategist Zyrel Velos stood at the center of the chaos. His bioluminescent eyes narrowed as he studied the readings before him. A veteran of 100 battles, he had led the Dominion's forces against countless foes. Pirate factions, rogue AI uprisings, even the terrifying swarm of Onvok. But this was different. This was unknown. Tactical report, he ordered, his voice calm despite the storm raging in his mind. A subordinate, his skin shimmering with stress-induced biolight, responded instantly. The object is confirmed as a capital-class warship, estimated length over 12 kilometers. No known energy signature, no transponder signal. It does not match any known human vessel previously catalogued. 12 kilometers? Zyril muttered, his pulse quickening. That was impossible. Humanity didn't have the industrial capacity to construct warships on that scale. Their fleets, while aggressive, were small, scrappy, barely a match for the Dominion's superior technology. And yet, here it was. A warship of impossible size, silent, deadly, and closing in fast. We have attempted multiple forms of communication, the communications officer added, his mandibles clicking nervously. No response. No signals. Just silence. Zyrel's gaze darkened. Silence in space was never a good sign. Predators did not announce their arrival. His second-in-command, Commander Rilth Varos, stepped forward, her emerald skin rippling, with unease. "Sir, I suggest we engage immediately. We have an entire fleet at our disposal. If this thing is a threat, we must neutralize it before it reaches our core worlds." The Dominion Defense Fleet was no small force. Over 300 warships had been stationed in Xylithra Prime, a testament to the sector's importance. It was a display of power meant to deter any would-be invaders. No one had ever breached these defenses. Until now. Cyril exhaled slowly, his mind racing. Why now? Why here? The humans shouldn't even know about this sector. Had their intelligence been wrong? Had they underestimated the Terrans? He turned back to the display. The warship was still silent, still closing in, and then it pulsed. A message or a warning. It wasn't a transmission in any conventional sense. There were no words, no language, no coded message, just a single pulse. A rhythmic, deliberate burst of energy that reverberated through the Dominion's long-range sensors like a heartbeat. The bridge fell silent as the crew stared at the readings in stunned disbelief. "What was that?" Rilth whispered. Cyril clenched his jaw. He had seen this tactic before. In nature, predators used such techniques to terrify their prey. Low, resonant sounds that triggered primal fear. It was psychological warfare. Another pulse. Stronger this time, and then another boom, boom, boom. Like the pounding of war drums before a battle. The tension on the bridge became unbearable. Officers shifted anxiously, their bioluminescence flickering erratically in response to their rising fear. This wasn't an attack. This was something worse. A statement. Cyril inhaled sharply. He had been wrong. The humans weren't requesting communication. They weren't seeking diplomacy. They were announcing their arrival. The Dominion fleet immediately went into full combat readiness. Weapons charged, shields activated, targeting arrays locked onto the approaching warship. A wall of firepower, capable of leveling entire planets, was now trained on a single target. And yet, the warship did not stop. It did not slow. It did not adjust its course. It simply continued forward, as if the armada before it was nothing more than an inconvenience. A cold realization dawned on Cyril. They were not dealing with an ordinary human vessel. This was something else. Something worse. His mandibles tightened. If the humans had built something like this, something capable of entering the heart of the Dominion without fear, what else had they been hiding? The countdown continued. The warship was now entering weapons range. Cyril took one last look at the silent behemoth before him, and for the first time in his long military career, he hesitated. "High Strategist," Rilth whispered. "Your orders?" Cyril did not respond, because deep in his bones he knew. This was only the beginning. The silence was unbearable. The Luthari Dominion had faced countless adversaries across the vastness of space. Rogue empires, cybernetic uprisings, interdimensional horrors that defied reality itself. But in all their history, nothing had ever approached their borders like this. Unannounced, unafraid, unstoppable. The Veil Koran, pride of the Dominion's fleet, stood at the center of a massive armada. 300 warships encircled the unknown intruder, their weapons fully primed, their targeting arrays locked. A lesser species would have already surrendered, or at least attempted to negotiate. But the Terran warship did neither. It simply kept advancing. "Proximity alert. The vessel will breach the outer defense perimeter in less than 30 rotations." Commander Rilth Varos turned toward Cyril, her voice edged with barely contained urgency. "Sir, we must act. This thing is not stopping. We cannot allow it to reach the core worlds." The High Strategist remained still, his bioluminescent gaze locked on the silent intruder. A warship of impossible scale, moving with an impossible level of precision, wielding an impossible level of power. His instincts screamed at him. There was something wrong about this ship. "Prepare a full spectrum scan," Cyril ordered. "I want every possible data point analyzed. Hull composition, internal structure, energy emissions, anything." The order was immediately carried out. The Dominion's most advanced scanning technologies surged to life, sweeping over the human vessel with unrelenting scrutiny. What came back was impossible, or worse, incomprehensible. The warship had no crew, no life signs, no organic readings, no known control centers. It was empty, a ghost ship. That revelation sent a ripple of horror through the command bridge. How could such a massive warship operate without a crew? Was it automated? A weaponized AI? Some kind of experimental construct? Theories swirled through the minds of the officers, each one more unsettling than the last. And then, another pulse. Boom, boom, boom. The rhythmic signal vibrated through the Dominion's communications systems, stronger now, closer. Cyrell inhaled, sharply. It wasn't just a message. It was scanning them. "It's analyzing us," one of the technicians whispered, their voice barely above a breath. "It's testing us. A predator observing its prey, calculating weaknesses, deciding when and where to strike." Cyril turned sharply toward his weapons officer. "Full fleet-wide bombardment, now." The first shots fired. The order spread through the fleet like wildfire. Across the formation, warships of every class powered up their most devastating weaponry: plasma lances, antimatter torpedoes, gravitic imploders. In unison, the Dominion defense fleet unleashed its fury. Beams of searing energy cut through the darkness. Torrents of explosive rounds streaked toward the enemy vessel at near-light speeds. The vacuum of space became a storm of destruction, an apocalyptic maelstrom of firepower aimed at a single target. And then, nothing. The warship did not react, did not evade, did not fire back. The Valkyran scanners displayed the impact reports: direct hits, overwhelming force, energy outputs high enough to vaporize entire moons. But as the firestorm cleared, the warship remained untouched, not damaged, not weakened, untouched. A cold, sinking horror gripped the bridge. Zirel's breath hitched as the realization dawned. It wasn't that their weapons had failed. It was that the warship had never been vulnerable, to begin with. Its hull, if it could even be called that, was something beyond comprehension. A substance unknown to any database, resistant to every known form of energy and projectile. Not deflecting or absorbing the attacks, but simply ignoring them. "This is not possible," one of the tactical officers gasped. "No known civilization has technology like this. Not even the Eldrin Ascendancy." And then, the warship responded. A deep, resonating hum spread through the fleet, a frequency so low it bypassed traditional communication channels and vibrated directly within the minds of every Luthari present. A single, alien voice filled their thoughts, observed, a single word, devoid of emotion, devoid of threat, and, yet, it carried a weight that crushed the very air out of the bridge. A new kind of enemy panic began to spread. For the first time in their history, the Luthari had encountered something beyond their ability to fight. High Strategist Zirel forced himself to remain calm, though his bioluminescence flickered erratically, a betrayal of his inner turmoil. This wasn't a warship. Not in the traditional sense, it was something else, something that should not exist. "Sir, the warship has increased its speed," an officer reported, their voice shaking. "It will reach direct engagement distance in less than 15 rotations." Zirel felt the weight of centuries of strategy pressing down on him. What do you do when you face an enemy beyond your understanding, when the very laws of reality seem to bend around them? He made his decision. All ships, retreat. A silence fell over the bridge. Rilth turned to him in disbelief. "Retreat?" Zirel's voice was firm. Yes. He had studied countless battles. He had read about civilizations that had fallen before forces they failed to comprehend. The greatest mistake was assuming you could fight something unknown. This warship, this thing, was beyond their knowledge. If they engaged recklessly, they risked extinction. "Send an emergency alert to the Dominion High Command. Inform them that we are dealing with an entity beyond classification." His gaze hardened. "And pull all ships back towards Zilithra. Prime. We need to regroup." But just as the order was about to be relayed, the warship vanished. Not in a burst of speed, not through a wormhole. It simply ceased to be. One moment it was there, an unstoppable force closing in. The next, nothing. Gone. Scanners flickered wildly, officers desperately trying to reacquire its location, but there was nothing. No residual energy signatures, no gravitational disturbances, as if it had never been there at all. Shirel's hands curled into fists. His mind raced through every possible explanation, but none of them made sense. And then, new signal appeared. This one wasn't coming from the warship. It was coming from within the Dominion itself. A single transmission from the Dominion's core homeworld. A distress beacon. A warning. Zerel's blood ran cold as the message played. They are already here. They are already here. The transmission repeated, its chilling tone echoing across the bridge of the Veil Quran like a whisper from the void itself. Every officer stood frozen, staring at the flickering data stream as if it were a death sentence. Commander Rilth's throat tightened. "Sir, our homeworld." High Strategist Zyril didn't respond. His mind raced through the implications, each more terrifying than the last. If the humans had already infiltrated the Dominion's core systems, if their warships could simply appear and disappear at will, then this was not a battle. This was something far worse. Jarrell turned sharply to the navigation officer. "What's the source of that transmission? Verify its authenticity." The officer's hands trembled over the console, attempting to cross-check Dominion security signatures. But the answer was already obvious. It was real. The message had come directly from Xylithra Prime, the Dominion's homeworld, a planet fortified with the most advanced defense systems ever devised. For a transmission of this urgency to break through, something catastrophic had happened. "Strategist," another officer whispered, his face drained of color. "If they were already inside our borders, why did they let us see that warship first? A deliberate show of force. A demonstration. Warning. The last defense of Xylithra Prime. All ships, jump to the homeworld. Now." The command was instant. 300 warships shifted into formation, their engines flaring with the heat of emergency warp drives. Space ripped open as the Dominion's greatest fleet surged through the fabric of reality itself, streaking toward their capital world at impossible speeds. The journey lasted only moments, and yet, when they arrived, it was already too late. Xylithra Prime was burning. Massive plumes of fire and debris spewed into space. The once proud core world of the Dominion reduced to a battlefield of smoldering wreckage and spiraling ruin. The defensive stations orbiting the planet, fortresses built to withstand intergalactic wars, had been silenced. Super dreadnoughts of the Dominion Navy drifted lifelessly, their hulls torn apart by weapons so advanced, their destruction defied analysis. The planetary shield, a barrier that had held against armadas, was offline, and on the surface, chaos cities crumbled beneath unseen forces. Entire districts had been wiped off the planetary map. The once glorious skyline of the Dominion's capital lay in ruins, reduced to nothing but scorched husks. There were no enemy ships in sight, no massive invasion force, only devastation. "Scanners! Find the enemy forces now!" Zerel barked. The technicians scrambled, their screens flickering wildly as they attempted to isolate the threat. But the answer was nothing. No warships, no armies, no signals, nothing. And yet, Xylithra Prime was falling. Cyrel's bioluminescent skin flared erratically, a deep primal panic washing over him. This was not war. This was annihilation. "They are watching." Sudden impact shook the Veil Quran, not from an external attack, not from weapons fire, something else, a pressure, a presence. And then, boom, 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 the same rhythmic signal, the same chilling pulse that had come from the human warship. But this time, it was coming from inside their own fleet. "No," Rilth gasped, her voice barely above a breath. "They're here." Across the formation, the Luthari warships flickered. One by one, their systems failed. Engines died, weapons deactivated. Entire vessels simply ceased functioning. And then, in the vastness of space, something manifested. Not a ship, not an army, a presence. The Dominion's scanners, designed to detect anything, failed to define what it was. It was as if the void itself had come alive. And then, through the broken transmissions of their collapsing fleet, the same alien voice returned, observed. A single word, but this time it was followed by another. Judged. Zeril felt his body go rigid. Something deep within him, something instinctual, told him that they had failed some kind of test, that this entire war was never about territory, never about conquest. It was about selection. and the Dominion had just been rejected. The final moments. The Valkyran shook violently. The viewports flickered, distorting reality itself. Officers collapsed, their bodies convulsing as if some unseen force was rewriting the laws of existence around them. Zirel fought to remain standing, fought to speak, to demand an explanation, and then he saw it. A figure. Not a Luthari, not an alien, a human. It stood at the center of the command deck, though the alarms never registered its presence. A tall, dark silhouette, clad in something that was neither armor nor flesh. Its eyes, if they could even be called that, glowed, with an intelligence far beyond comprehension. It had no weapons. It didn't need them. Cyril's voice came out in a whisper. "What are you?" The figure tilted its head, studying him. Then, in a voice that did not come from its mouth, but from the very fabric of existence itself, it spoke. "We are the architects of war." Cyril's vision blurred. He felt his body disintegrating, or evolving. His last thought was a horrifying realization. This was not an invasion. It was a harvest. And the Luthari Dominion was not worthy to be among the stars. The Void's judgment. There was no sound, no warning, no resistance. The Dominion's entire fleet, 300 warships, some of the most advanced vessels in the known galaxy, simply ceased to exist, not destroyed, not vaporized, not even left as wreckage. They were gone. 1 second, the massive armada stood poised above their burning homeworld. The next, emptiness. The void reasserted itself. The stars shined undisturbed. The warships had left no trace, as if they had never been there at all. And on the bridge of the Valkyran, High Strategist Ziril stood frozen. His fingers trembled over the control panel. But there was nothing left to command. He was alone. Except for it. The human. Or at least, the thing that looked like one. It still stood at the center of the bridge, unbothered by the destruction it had just orchestrated. Its dark silhouette flickered, at times solid, at times translucent, like something caught between dimensions. Ziril forced himself to speak. His voice was barely a whisper. "What did you do?" The figure slowly turned to face him. Its expression was unreadable, its form shifting in ways that defied logic. And then it answered. "Correction. What did you do?" Ziril's blood ran cold. The sins of the Dominion. He staggered back, his mind frantic, trying to process, trying to understand. What did he do? Was it a mistake? Some miscalculation? Or was it something worse? The Dominion had ruled for millennia. Their empire stretched across hundreds of star systems. Their military unmatched, their laws absolute. They had conquered, assimilated, exterminated those who stood in their way. Was this the price? Ziril's breathing quickened. He thought of the worlds they had raised, the civilizations they had crushed beneath their rule, the species that had been erased from existence simply because they did not fit into the Dominion's grand vision. And now the Dominion was the one being erased. His voice cracked. "You think we deserve this?" The human thing tilted its head, considering. Then, slowly, it stepped forward. Ziril felt the weight of its presence. A crushing, invisible gravity that pressed against his bones, his mind, his very essence. "Deserve?" The figure reached out. Ziril flinched, but there was no pain, only understanding. Visions flooded his mind. A glimpse into humanity. He saw fire. Not the destruction of Zilithra Prime. Something far older. Ancient wars waged on Earth. Humans fighting each other in endless cycles of bloodshed. Empires rising and falling. Civilizations devouring themselves in their hunger for power. Then, the stars. Humanity's first steps beyond their cradle. Their wars continued, but they learned. They adapted. They became something more. They evolved. Not biologically, but strategically, philosophically. They learned the cost of unchecked power. They learned that true conquest was not military, but existential. And they had waited. Waited until another empire thought itself invincible. Waited until the perfect moment. waited for Zyral's dominion. The realization crushed him. They had never been at war with humanity. Humanity had already won before the first shot was fired. A war that never was. Zyral collapsed to his knees. His body shook, his mind fractured. The thing that was human loomed over him, its presence suffocating. Zyral's voice was weak. This wasn't a war. A pause. Then, in a voice that resonated through reality itself, "No." Zyral looked up, his bioluminescent skin flickering weakly. Then what was it? The figure leaned down, its face inches from Zyral's. An observation. The words struck harder than any weapon. Zyral's mind reeled. The Dominion's entire existence, its wars, its conquests, its history of dominance, had been a mere study, a test, and they had failed. The Dominion was never humanity's enemy. It was their subject. Humanity had watched, calculated, waited until the moment was right. And now, they had deemed the Dominion unfit to continue. Zyral's throat tightened. You think you're gods?" The human thing's form shimmered, shifting between dimensions. Then, with chilling certainty, not gods, something worse. The final choice. Zyral's heart pounded. He knew what came next. Obliteration. Total erasure. The Dominion would vanish from history, just like the countless species it had crushed beneath its rule. Unless he took the deal. The human thing tilted its head. "One remains." Zyral's breath hitched. "What?" "One remains." It was offering him something. A chance. A final option. But at what cost? Zyral swallowed. His body trembled, his mind racing. He knew the weight of this moment. To live alone, the last of his kind. A survivor of an empire that never truly existed, or to vanish with them. The choice was his. And as the void closed in around him, as the stars flickered one last time, Zyral whispered his answer. And the Dominion was no more. The price of survival. The silence was suffocating. Zyral opened his eyes. For a fleeting moment, he thought he had awoken from a nightmare. Until he realized the nightmare had followed him. The Vile Quran was gone. The Dominion's fleet, erased from existence. He stood alone on a barren world, its surface charred and lifeless. The sky was an unnatural shade of black where no stars shined. The air was still, stagnant, a world abandoned by the universe itself, a graveyard. His body felt different, lighter, as if he was not entirely there. He looked at his hands. His once lustrous bioluminescent skin was dull. His veins no longer pulsed with vibrant energy, but with something cold, something artificial. A presence stirred behind him. He turned. The human thing stood there, unchanged, unbothered, watching. Zyral's voice cracked. "Where am I?" The figure tilted its head slightly, then raised a hand. And reality bent. The observer's domain. The world around him shifted. The barren wasteland vanished, replaced by an infinite expanse of dark metal and shifting machinery. The sky above became a vast network of pulsating lights, forming incomprehensible patterns that spiraled endlessly into the void. A station? No. Something far greater. Zyral was standing on the surface of a construct, one that stretched beyond the limits of perception. It was not built in the way civilizations constructed their cities or warships. It was as if reality itself had been rewritten to accommodate its presence. His knees weakened. "What is this place?" The figure stepped forward. A record. Zyral's breath hitched. "A record?" The human thing raised a hand again. The space around them rippled, and Zyral saw them. 1,000 civilizations. Some familiar. Some long extinct. Some that had never been known to the galaxy. All recorded, preserved, dissected. Their histories displayed in a manner beyond comprehension. Their rise and fall catalogued in absolute detail. A library? A prison? A warning? Zyral took a shaky step back. Why? Why am I here? The human thing's form flickered again, its voice colder than the void itself. Because you chose to remain. The words sank into him like a blade. This was not a mercy, this was a consequence. The true purpose of humanity. Wirel's mind reeled. He had survived, but at what cost? He looked around, searching for an answer. For something that made sense. For something that told him why. And then he saw it. The Dominion's record. It was there, laid out in intricate, agonizing detail. Every war, every conquest, every atrocity, and at the bottom, a verdict. He took a step closer, his heart pounding. The glowing inscription shifted, rearranging itself into something he could understand. Then, for the first time since the human Warship arrived, he felt true, unrelenting terror. Failed species, purged. His throat tightened. He turned back toward the figure. Who are you? His voice was barely above a whisper. The human thing slowly lifted its gaze, and for the first time it gave him an answer. We were like you once. We were warriors. We were conquerors. We were a species that ruled through destruction. Zyral's breath was shallow. But you changed. A long silence. Then, no. We adapted. The words struck like an impact tremor. Zyral wanted to deny it, to reject what he was hearing. But deep down, he understood. Humanity had been something else long ago. A species of war, a species of conquest, and they had learned, not mercy, not morality, not peace, but efficiency. They had seen the cycle, the rise and fall of empires, the endless wars, the inevitable self-destruction, and they had found a way to control it, to determine which species were worthy of existing and which were not. Cyral's voice shook. You play God. The figure's form wavered, its presence impossibly vast. Then, in a voice etched with finality, gods rule with compassion. We rule with certainty. The last survivor Zyrel could feel the weight of eternity closing in around him. He was the last of the Dominion, a remnant of something that had already been erased from history, a specimen to be studied, a lesson. He turned back to the inscription of his people's fate. His hands trembled as he traced the glowing verdict. Failed species. Purged. This was what remained of everything they had built. Zyrel exhaled shakily, his voice barely held together. What happens now? The human thing did not answer. Instead, the world began to change again. The machinery around them shrank, twisted, and reformed. The infinite records of species past faded into the void, and Zyrel felt his body begin to dissolve. Not in pain, not in destruction, but into memory. He was becoming part of the record, a ghost of his people, a reminder of what happens to those who believe they are invincible. His last thought before the void took him was not of fear. It was of understanding. The Dominion had never stood a chance, not against humanity, not against something worse. The final warning, and then silence, a black void, nothingness. Then a faint whisper echoed into the universe, a warning, a fate already sealed. A message for the next civilization that dared to challenge the unknown. Warning. Human warship detected. An enemy is closing in. Would they listen, or would they disappear like the rest? Call to action. What do you think? Could humanity truly evolve beyond war? Or is their ultimate destiny something far more terrifying? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep space horror, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Xeno Chronicles for more cosmic nightmares and sci-fi thrillers. Until next time, watch the stars. You never know who's watching back.